My name is Zephira. I'm 26, and the day I walked out of my family's million-dollar business was the day I discovered my sister had been systematically destroying my life for over a decade. What started as a simple workplace disagreement about vacation schedules ended with my father choosing sides, the wrong side. When he suspended me until I apologized to precious Celeste, I smiled and said, "All right." But instead of groveling, I did something that would unravel every lie, expose every manipulation, and bring their entire empire crashing down around them. Before we dive into this family revenge story, tell me, where are you watching from? Hit that like button if you're ready for some serious family drama, and don't forget to subscribe, because this tale of justice will leave you questioning everything about blood loyalty. Trust me, you won't want to miss how this unfolds. The Hawthorne family business had been my entire world since childhood. Dad built Hawthorne Luxury Events from nothing, a wedding planning empire that now handled celebrity galas, corporate retreats, and society weddings across 3 states. Growing up, I lived and breathed every aspect of the company. From learning floral arrangements at age 12 to managing million-dollar budgets by 21. Celeste, my younger sister by 3 years, joined the company right after college with a marketing degree and Dad's unwavering favoritism. Where I had earned my stripes through years of grunt work, late nights, and proven results, Celeste waltzed in with titles, corner offices, and creative control I'd been begging for years to receive. The vacation incident that triggered everything seemed so trivial in retrospect. Our biggest client of the year, the Pemberton Walsh wedding, was scheduled for the same weekend. Celeste wanted to attend some influencer retreat in Tulum. I'd already requested that weekend off months earlier for my best friend's bachelorette party, the first personal time I'd taken in 18 months. "Zeph, you know how important this Mexican trip is for my brand building," Celeste had whined during our Monday morning staff meeting, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against her MacBook. "Daddy, tell her she needs to cover the Pemberton wedding. She's so much better at handling the bridezilla types anyway." Dad didn't even look up from his newspaper. "Zephira, you'll handle the Pemberton event. Celeste's networking opportunities are crucial for our social media expansion." "But Dad, I put in for that weekend off 6 months ago. Sarah's bachelorette." "Family business comes first," he interrupted, finally glancing up with those cold blue eyes that had intimidated me since childhood. "Besides, you're the operations manager. This is literally your job." Celeste smirked from across the conference table, and something in that expression triggered a memory I'd been suppressing. That same smirk when my high school boyfriend mysteriously dumped me right before prom. The identical look when my college acceptance letter to Northwestern, my dream school, somehow got lost in the mail until it was too late to accept. The satisfied smile when my previous assistant quit, suddenly claiming I was impossible to work with. After the meeting, I sat in my cramped office, a stark contrast to Celeste's spacious corner suite, and something clicked. I pulled out my phone and started making calls. Sarah first, then my college advisor, then Marcus, my ex-boyfriend who I'd lost touch with years ago. The conversations were enlightening and horrifying in equal measure. Sarah, my college roommate and best friend, had always been puzzled by my apparent coldness. "Zeph, I tried calling you so many times junior year when my mom was sick. You never returned any of my calls. I figured you were just too busy with that internship." But I'd never gotten any calls from Sarah that year. In fact, I'd assumed she was avoiding me. My college advisor, Mrs. Patterson, was even more revealing. "Zephira, I was so disappointed when you turned down the Northwestern opportunity. Your sister called to inform us you'd decided to stay local for family reasons. Very mature of you, but such a waste of your potential." My blood ran cold. Celeste had intercepted my acceptance letter and called to decline on my behalf. Marcus was the most painful call. "Zeph, I'm glad you finally reached out. I never understood why you stood me up at homecoming senior year, then spread rumors that I was cheating with Jennifer Walsh. My friends showed me the screenshots of texts from your number, but they seemed so unlike you. Screenshots of texts I'd never sent from my own phone number." Each revelation felt like a physical blow. Celeste hadn't just been Dad's favorite. She'd been systematically sabotaging my relationships, opportunities, and reputation for years. But how? How had she managed to intercept my mail, access my phone, manipulate my communications? That evening, I stayed late at the office, supposedly working on Pemberton wedding logistics. In reality, I was conducting a different kind of investigation. Our office building was old-school corporate, the kind where executives had master keys and security cameras were more for show than actual security. I started in Celeste's office, carefully searching through her immaculate desk drawers and filing cabinets. At first, I found nothing unusual: marketing materials, vendor contracts, the standard business paperwork. But then I discovered a locked drawer in her credenza, hidden behind a stack of design magazines. The lock was cheap, the kind you'd find on a teenage diary. A paperclip, and 5 minutes of patience later, I was staring at the contents that would change everything. Inside were copies of my personal documents, my phone bills, bank statements, credit reports, even my lease agreement. There were printed emails between Celeste and various people from my past conversations, where she'd impersonated me or fed them false information. Screenshots of messages she'd sent from spoofed numbers. A handwritten timeline tracking my relationships and opportunities, with notes about how to neutralize threats and redirect opportunities. But the most damning evidence was a letter from Northwestern dated 3 years ago, offering me a full scholarship for their MBA program. A program I'd never even known I'd been accepted to. Celeste's handwriting in the margin read "Called to decline," told them Z decided to focus on family business instead. My hands were shaking as I photographed everything with my phone. Years of gaslighting, manipulation, and sabotage, all documented in my sister's neat handwriting. Every missed opportunity, every failed relationship, every moment I'd blamed myself for not being good enough, it was all her. The final item in the drawer was a recent email exchange between Celeste and Dad discussing my attitude problem and how I was becoming a liability to company morale. The thread included a detailed plan to gradually reduce my responsibilities and eventually force me out of the business entirely, clearing the way for Celeste to take over as his sole successor. I sat in her leather chair, surrounded by evidence of the most comprehensive betrayal I could imagine, and felt something shift inside me. The hurt was there, raw and overwhelming, but underneath it was something harder and more focused: determination. Celeste had spent years playing chess while I'd been playing checkers. She'd manipulated every aspect of my life with surgical precision, destroying relationships and opportunities while positioning herself as the golden child. But she'd made one crucial mistake: she'd kept records of everything. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat in my apartment kitchen with a bottle of wine and my laptop, meticulously organizing the evidence I'd photographed. Every document, every email, every handwritten note got cataloged and cross-referenced. By dawn, I had built a timeline that revealed the true scope of Celeste's decade-long campaign against me. The pattern was sophisticated and cruel. She'd identified every person or opportunity that mattered to me, then systematically destroyed them through a combination of impersonation, manipulation, and strategic information sharing. High school boyfriend. Fake texts from my number suggesting I was cheating. College scholarship intercepted and declined without my knowledge. Job opportunities. References contacted with false information about my character. But what struck me most was how she'd positioned herself as the supportive sister throughout it all. Every time something went wrong in my life, Celeste was there with tissues and comfort, helping me pick up the pieces of relationships she'd deliberately shattered. She'd even suggested I see a therapist for my trust issues and self-sabotaging behavior. The depth of the psychological manipulation was staggering. She hadn't just stolen opportunities. She'd made me doubt my own judgment, my own worth, my own reality. For years I'd believed I was the problem: too intense, too demanding, too difficult to love. Tuesday morning arrived with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. I dressed carefully for work, choosing my most professional outfit and taking extra time with my appearance. If I was going to play chess, I needed to look like a player who deserved a seat at the table. The office felt different as I walked through the familiar halls. Every interaction I observed between Celeste and other employees took on new meaning. The way she subtly redirected conversations when credit was due to others. How she'd positioned herself as the reasonable sister when conflicts arose. The careful way she planted seeds of doubt about my competence in casual conversations. She was good. Better than I'd ever imagined. "Morning, Zeph." Celeste's cheerful voice called out as I passed her office. Ready for another day in paradise, I paused in her doorway, studying the sister I thought I'd known my entire life. She looked so normal, so perfectly put together in her designer blazer and artfully tousled blonde waves. It was hard to reconcile this image with the calculating manipulator I'd discovered the night before. "Actually, I wanted to thank you," I said, keeping my voice warm and genuine. Her perfectly sculpted eyebrows rose slightly. "Thank me for what?" "For helping me see things more clearly yesterday. You're right, family business should come first. I've been too focused on my own wants instead of what's best for the company." Something flickered across her face, surprise, maybe even suspicion, but her smile never wavered. "Of course, Zeph. We're a team, right? Always have been. Absolutely. Sisters supporting sisters." I spent the morning behaving exactly as Celeste would expect, compliant, slightly defeated, focused on wedding logistics, but beneath the surface I was conducting reconnaissance. I needed to understand the full scope of her influence within the company before making any moves. My first stop was accounting. Margaret, our bookkeeper for 15 years, had always been fond of me. While discussing vendor payments for upcoming events, I carefully steered the conversation toward company structure and succession planning. "Between you and me, dear Margaret," confided, lowering her voice conspiratorially, "your father's been making some interesting changes to the corporate structure lately. Transferring ownership shares, updating beneficiaries. Your sister's been quite involved in those discussions." My blood chilled, but I kept my expression neutral. "Oh, that makes sense. Celeste has always been good with the business side." Margaret hummed, but something in her tone suggested she had more to say. "Though I did think it was odd when she requested copies of all your employment records last month. Said it was for insurance purposes, but we've never needed that level of detail before." Employment records. Celeste had been building a case against me, documenting everything she could use to justify my eventual termination. The vacation incident wasn't random, it was the final piece of evidence she needed to paint me as insubordinate and unreliable. My next conversation was with David, our head of security, who I'd known since he started working for Dad 8 years ago. While ostensibly discussing camera placement for the Pemberton venue, I mentioned having trouble with my office computer lately. "Weird you mention that," David said, scratching his graying beard. "Your sister had me pull the IT logs for your workstation last week. Said there might be some security concerns, unauthorized access attempts. But when I looked into it, everything seemed normal on your end." Unauthorized access attempts. More evidence gathering for her case against me. By lunch, I had a clear picture of the trap being built around me. Celeste wasn't just stealing my opportunities. She was systematically documenting everything she could use to justify my removal from the family business. The vacation conflict was meant to be my final strike, the insubordination that would give Dad an excuse to suspend or fire me. But understanding her strategy gave me power. If Celeste wanted to play corporate politics, I'd play the game better than she ever imagined. I spent my lunch hour in my car, making phone calls to every vendor, client, and industry contact I'd built relationships with over the years. Not to complain or gossip, but to subtly position myself as the real operational force behind Hawthorne luxury events. I scheduled coffee meetings, site visits, and planning sessions that would occur over the next 2 weeks, all with me as the primary contact. The afternoon brought a stroke of luck. Dad called an emergency staff meeting to discuss the Pemberton wedding logistics, clearly expecting me to be flustered and unprepared. Instead, I arrived with detailed timelines, vendor confirmations, and backup plans for every conceivable scenario. "Impressive work, Zephira," Dad acknowledged grudgingly. "Though I still expect you to apologize to your sister for your attitude yesterday." I looked directly at Celeste, whose confident smile faltered slightly under my steady gaze. "Of course, Dad. I owe Celeste an apology for a lot of things, actually. I'm planning something really special." The confusion in her eyes was delicious. She'd expected capitulation or defiance, not cryptic pleasantries. For the first time in our relationship, I was the one with secrets. The next 2 weeks were the most intense of my professional life but also the most satisfying. While Celeste jetted off to Tulum for her influencer retreat, posting perfectly curated beach photos and networking with lifestyle bloggers, I was quietly revolutionizing my position within the family business. The Pemberton Walsh wedding became my masterpiece. Instead of simply executing their event, I treated it as an audition for every future client and vendor relationship I'd ever want. I arrived at the venue at 5 in the morning, personally overseeing every detail from floral arrangements to lighting design. When the bride's custom Vera Wang gown arrived with a small tear, I didn't panic. I'd already researched 3 backup solutions and had a seamstress on standby. But more importantly, I made sure every guest vendor and staff member knew exactly who was responsible for the flawless execution they were witnessing. Zephyrah Hawthorne is absolutely brilliant. I overheard Mrs. Pemberton telling a group of society matrons during cocktail hour. She anticipated every possible issue and solved problems I didn't even know we had. When we plan my daughter's engagement party next year, I'm specifically requesting her. By the end of the evening, I had collected 17 business cards from potential new clients, all specifically asking to work with me. 3 major vendors offered me partnership opportunities. The photographer even asked if I'd consider freelance event consulting, claiming he'd never seen such seamless coordination. While Celeste was building her brand in Mexico, I was building an actual reputation based on competence and results. The Monday after her return, Celeste swept into the office with her usual theatrical flair, designer luggage in tow, and phone already pressed to her ear, as she conducted some supposedly important business call. She'd posted dozens of photos from her retreat, sunrise, yoga sessions, networking brunches, inspirational quotes overlaid on sunset beach shots. Her Instagram following had grown by several thousand, and she clearly expected to be celebrated for this achievement. "Zeph, you should have seen the connections I made," she gushed during our morning meeting, scrolling through her phone to show Dad carefully curated photos of her with various influencers and minor celebrities. 3 major lifestyle brands want to collaborate with us now. This is exactly the kind of modern marketing approach we need. Dad nodded approvingly, but I noticed something different in his expression. Less automatic praise, more analytical consideration. "That's wonderful, Celeste," I said, with genuine enthusiasm. "I'd love to hear more about converting those connections into actual bookings. Speaking of which, I should update you both on the results from the Pemberton event." I'd prepared a comprehensive presentation, complete with client testimonials, vendor feedback, and most importantly, concrete new business prospects. 17 potential clients weren't just social media followers, they were actual wealthy individuals with actual events that needed planning and actual budgets to spend. Mrs. Pemberton specifically requested me for her daughter's engagement party in December. I continued watching Celeste smile tighten almost imperceptibly. "The Hendersons want us to handle their anniversary gala next spring. And the Montgomery family is considering us for their son's wedding that's potentially a $300,000 event." Dad leaned forward, his businessman instincts clearly engaged. $300,000 conservative estimate. They're thinking destination wedding, multiple events over a long weekend. I've scheduled a preliminary meeting for Friday to discuss their vision. Celeste's perfectly manicured fingers drummed against the conference table. That's great, Zeph. Really impressive follow-up work." But her tone suggested anything but admiration. I could practically see the gears turning behind her blue eyes, recalculating whatever strategy she'd planned for my downfall. The shift in dynamics became even more apparent over the following days. Where Celeste had grown accustomed to walking into meetings and immediately commanding attention with her latest social media metrics or brand partnership ideas, she now found herself competing with actual business results. I'd also begun rebuilding relationships with our existing staff, particularly the long-term employees who'd watched me grow up in the business. Margaret in accounting, David in security, even Janet, our receptionist. I made a point of acknowledging their contributions and asking for their input on operational improvements. "You know," Margaret mentioned during one of our coffee breaks, "it's refreshing to work with someone who understands the nuts and bolts of the business. Too many young people these days think success is all about image and social media presence." The comment wasn't directed at Celeste specifically, but we both knew what Margaret was really saying. My most important alliance, however, came from an unexpected source. James Worthington, Dad's longtime business attorney and family friend, attended our monthly board meeting as usual. But this time, instead of just sitting quietly while Dad and Celeste discussed strategy, he pulled me aside afterward. "Zephyra, I've been watching your work lately," he said in his measured, careful way. "Very impressive. Your father's lucky to have someone with your operational expertise." "Thank you, Mr. Worthington. I've learned from the best." He studied me for a moment, and I sensed there was more he wanted to say. "You know, I've been handling your family's legal affairs for over 20 years. I've seen a lot of family businesses succeed and fail. The ones that survive are usually the ones that prioritize competence over other factors." It was a subtle warning, but I understood perfectly. James had noticed the same dynamics I'd been living with for years. Dad's favoritism toward Celeste, despite her lack of substantial business contribution. "I appreciate that insight," I said carefully. "I'm always interested in learning about sustainable business practices." "Good. Because sustainability often requires difficult decisions about leadership and succession. Wise families plan for those transitions carefully." That evening, I found myself thinking about James's words while reviewing the evidence I'd collected about Celeste's sabotage. I'd been so focused on personal revenge that I'd overlooked the bigger picture. The family business itself was at risk. Dad was grooming Celeste to eventually take over despite her obvious limitations. Her social media following might look impressive to clients initially, but when it came time to execute complex events under pressure, she consistently delegated the real work to others. She was more interested in being photographed at events than actually managing them. If she eventually inherited control of Hawthorne luxury events, how long would it take before clients started looking elsewhere? How long before our reputation for excellence became a reputation for beautiful Instagram posts with mediocre results? The business Dad had spent 30 years building could be destroyed within a few years under Celeste's leadership, and he was too blinded by favoritism to see it. This realization shifted my entire approach. This wasn't just about exposing Celeste's personal betrayals, it was about saving the family legacy. The evidence I'd gathered wasn't just ammunition for revenge. It was documentation of someone fundamentally unfit for leadership. But I knew I'd only get one chance to present my case. Dad's favoritism ran deep, and Celeste was skilled at deflecting criticism and playing the victim. If I moved too early or too aggressively, she'd find a way to turn the situation against me. I needed her to make a mistake. A big one. The kind of error that would be impossible to explain away or blame on someone else. Fortunately, Celeste's arrogance was about to provide exactly the opportunity I needed. The opportunity I'd been waiting for arrived in the form of the Morrison Corporate Retreat, a 5-day luxury event for a tech company celebrating their IPO. The contract was worth $400,000, our biggest single event of the year, and Dad assigned both Celeste and me to co-manage it. "This will be perfect," he announced during our Monday morning meeting. "Celeste can handle the creative vision and social media documentation, while Zephyra manages the logistics." Teamwork at its finest. I watched Celeste's expression carefully. She clearly resented being paired with me on such a high-profile event, especially after my recent string of successes. But she also saw an opportunity. If anything went wrong, she could blame my operational failures while taking credit for any creative wins. What she didn't realize was that I'd been planning for exactly this scenario. The Morrison event was scheduled for the following week at an exclusive mountain resort 3 hours outside the city. The client wanted everything: welcome dinner, team-building activities, entertainment, spa services, and a closing gala with live music and fireworks. It was the kind of complex, multifaceted event that required flawless coordination between dozens of vendors and perfect timing across multiple days. I spent the week before departure in meticulous preparation, but I also laid several carefully placed traps. Nothing that would actually harm the event or our clients. I wasn't willing to damage our reputation for revenge. Instead, I created situations where Celeste's incompetence and character flaws would be impossible to hide. The first trap was simple. I accidentally scheduled 2 crucial vendor meetings at the same time, then volunteered to handle the less glamorous catering logistics while suggesting Celeste take the photography and entertainment. Coordination. I knew she'd jump at the chance to work with the celebrity photographer and band, leaving me with the unsexy but critical task of ensuring people actually got fed. The second trap involved the social media documentation she was so excited about. I'd noticed that Celeste often staged photos and posted about behind-the-scenes work she wasn't actually doing. So I made sure our videographer would be capturing the real behind-the-scenes action, all of it. But the biggest trap was psychological. I began subtly praising Celeste's ideas in front of Dad and the Morrison executives, positioning her as the creative visionary, while positioning myself as merely the implementer. Her ego couldn't resist taking full credit for concepts I'd actually developed, and I made sure everything was documented. "Celeste, your vision for the welcome dinner theme is absolutely brilliant," I gushed during our final planning meeting, while our videographer rolled tape. I never would have thought to combine rustic elegance with tech-forward lighting design. She preened under the praise, not realizing I was building a case for her, taking full responsibility for every creative decision. The event itself unfolded like a carefully orchestrated performance. Day 1 went smoothly. Welcome dinner executed flawlessly, guests impressed, social media buzz building. Celeste spent most of her time posing for photos and networking with executives, while I handled the constant stream of small crises that accompany any large event. Day 2 was when cracks began to show. The team-building activities Celeste had designed looked beautiful on Instagram but proved logistically nightmarish. Equipment wasn't properly coordinated, timing ran over by hours, and the celebrity motivational speaker she'd booked turned out to be completely wrong for a tech company audience delivering a speech about traditional values to a progressive Silicon Valley crowd. "There seems to be some miscommunication about our speaker's content," I murmured to Morrison's CEO during the awkward presentation, making sure my concerns sounded professional rather than critical. "Wasn't this your sister's responsibility?" he asked, glancing toward where Celeste was, frantically whispering with our event coordinator. "I'm sure it's just a minor oversight. These things happen with complex events." But I made sure our videographer captured every moment of the cultural mismatch, every uncomfortable silence from the audience, every instance of Celeste scrambling to salvage her poorly planned activity. Day 3 brought the real disaster. Celeste had insisted on personally managing the evening entertainment, a surprise performance by a moderately famous indie band she'd discovered through her influencer connections. She'd been posting teaser photos all day, building anticipation among the Morrison employees, and positioning herself as the mastermind behind this exclusive musical experience. What she hadn't properly investigated was the band's recent controversy. 3 days before our event, their lead singer had been arrested for a very public domestic violence incident. The story had exploded across social media, but Celeste had been too busy staging photo shoots to notice. I discovered the news 2 days earlier and had immediately prepared backup entertainment options, but I didn't warn Celeste. Instead, I waited. The moment arrived during the pre-dinner cocktail hour. Morrison's HR director approached Celeste with a concerned expression and a smartphone displaying the arrest headlines. "Miss Hawthorne, we have a serious problem with tonight's entertainment choice," she said loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. "This band's association with domestic violence directly contradicts our company's values. We cannot have them perform at our corporate event." Celeste's face went white, then red, then white again as she realized the magnitude of her oversight. I had no idea. The booking was made weeks ago. "We need an immediate solution," the HR director continued. "Our employees are already asking questions about the social media posts you've been sharing." This was my moment. I stepped forward calmly, already pulling out my phone to contact our backup entertainment. "I anticipated potential last-minute changes," I said smoothly, so I maintained relationships with several backup performers. "I can have a jazz quartet here within 2 hours, or a classical ensemble within 90 minutes. Both have performed for Fortune 500 companies and have been thoroughly vetted." The relief on Morrison's executives' faces was palpable. But more importantly, every single person in the vicinity, employees, vendors, our own staff, had witnessed who had caused the crisis and who had solved it. Celeste stood frozen, her carefully constructed image, as the creative visionary crumbling in real time. The incident was captured by our videographer, documented in the event timeline, and witnessed by the most important client we'd had all year. "Thank you," Zephyr Morrison's CEO said warmly. "This is exactly why we chose Hawthorne Luxury Events. Your ability to handle unexpected challenges with professionalism and preparation." As I coordinated the backup entertainment, I watched Celeste retreat to the hotel lobby, frantically making phone calls and deleting her promotional posts about the canceled band. Her embarrassment was complete, but her humiliation was just beginning. Because tomorrow was the final gala and I had one last surprise prepared, the revelation that would end her reign of manipulation forever. The morning after the entertainment crisis, I found Celeste in the hotel restaurant picking listlessly at a fruit bowl and staring at her phone with the expression of someone watching her world collapse in real time. The Morrison employees kept approaching our table to thank me personally for saving their evening. Each interaction making her sink deeper into her chair. "Zeph," she said when we were finally alone, her voice uncharacteristically small, "I need you to help me fix this with Dad. The band thing wasn't my fault. How could I have predicted the arrest?" It was fascinating watching her attempt to manipulate me even while drowning. Still trying to position herself as the victim, still expecting me to clean up her mistakes, still completely unaware that I knew the truth about everything she'd done to me over the years. "Of course, Celeste," I said gently. "We're sisters. We support each other, right?" Relief flooded her features. "Exactly. And honestly, maybe we should revise the story a little, make it sound like we were co-managing the entertainment choices, so the responsibility is shared." There it was, the same pattern she'd used my entire life. Create a disaster, then find a way to spread the blame while claiming the credit for any solutions. But this time, I had witnesses, documentation, and a video record of exactly who had made which decisions. "That's a great idea," I agreed. "In fact, I think we should have a full debrief with Dad and the Morrison executives about how the event went overall. Really transparent communication about what worked and what we can improve for future events." Her smile faltered slightly. "A debrief? Is that really necessary? I mean, overall, the event was a success." "Absolutely. Morrison CEO specifically requested it. He wants to understand our decision-making process for future partnerships." What she didn't know was that I'd already scheduled the debrief for that afternoon, and I'd invited not just Dad and the Morrison executives, but also James Worthington and our videographer, ostensibly, to create a case study for future marketing materials. The meeting took place in the resort's conference room, with Morrison's leadership team, Dad, James, Celeste, and me seated around an elegant oak table. I'd prepared a comprehensive presentation covering every aspect of the event, complete with video footage, client testimonials, and detailed breakdowns of what had worked and what hadn't. Before we begin, I announced, I want to acknowledge that this was truly a collaborative effort. Celeste and I approached this event as a team, and I think it's important that everyone understands each person's specific contributions. Celeste relaxed, visibly assuming I was about to help her save face. Dad looked pleased by what he interpreted as sisterly cooperation. I started with the successes, the flawless catering, the seamless logistics, the backup planning that had saved the final evening. For each achievement, I played corresponding video footage showing me coordinating with vendors, solving problems, and managing the complex moving pieces that made the event possible. Now, let's discuss the creative vision. I continued advancing to slides featuring Celeste's contributions. Celeste took full ownership of the entertainment planning and team-building activities. She was very passionate about these elements. The video footage spoke for itself. Celeste posing for Instagram photos while vendors waited for direction. The disastrous team-building activities that ran hours over schedule. Her confident social media posts promoting the scandal-ridden band time-stamped just hours before the news broke. But the most damning moment came when I played audio from our planning meetings where she'd explicitly claimed full credit for creative decisions and dismissed my suggestions for backup planning as unnecessary pessimism. "I believe in trusting my instincts," her recorded voice declared confidently. "When you've got the right vision, you don't need backup plans." The silence in the room was deafening. Morrison's executives exchanged glances, their expressions shifting from professional politeness to obvious concern. Dad's face had gone through several color changes, settling on a grayish pallor that suggested he was finally seeing his golden child clearly. Of course, I continued smoothly. We all learned valuable lessons from this experience. Celeste, would you like to share your thoughts on how we might handle entertainment vetting differently in future events? She sat frozen clearly, realizing that anything she said would either contradict the evidence I'd just presented or further incriminate her. Her usual confident deflection tactics were useless when confronted with video documentation of her actual performance. Morrison's CEO cleared his throat. Miss Hawthorne Zephyra I. Have to say your preparation and crisis management throughout this event have been exceptional. The entertainment issue could have been a disaster for our company's reputation, but your backup planning saved us completely. Thank you, I replied graciously. Crisis management is really about anticipating problems before they occur and having solutions ready. It's not glamorous work, but it's essential for maintaining client trust. The implicit contrast with Celeste's approach was obvious to everyone in the room. James Worthington, who had remained silent throughout the presentation, finally spoke. This kind of operational excellence and accountability is exactly what separates successful event companies from amateur operations. Clients need to trust that their events are in competent hands. Dad found his voice. Celeste, I think we need to discuss your approach to vendor research and backup planning. Daddy, you're making too big a deal out of one small oversight, she protested, finally reverting to the childish tone she'd used to manipulate him for years. Everyone makes mistakes. The important thing is that Zeph was there to fix it. But this time her usual charm offensive fell flat. After witnessing her incompetence and seeing the video evidence of her poor decision-making, Dad's protective instincts had shifted. This wasn't a small oversight, Celeste. This was a fundamental failure to research and plan properly. The Morrison account represents $400,000 in revenue and potentially millions in future business. Your choices could have destroyed our relationship with them entirely. The meeting concluded with Morrison's team specifically requesting me as the primary contact for all future events, and James scheduling a private conversation with Dad about operational leadership and succession planning. As we packed up to return home, Celeste made one last attempt at damage control. You really threw me under the bus in there, she accused, cornering me in the hotel lobby. I thought we were supposed to support each other. I looked at my sister, really looked at her, and felt something like pity alongside my anger. She genuinely believed she was the victim in this scenario, unable to accept responsibility for her own failures, even when confronted with irrefutable evidence. We absolutely should support each other, I agreed. In fact, I have something special planned for when we get back to the office. A real heart-to-heart conversation where we can clear the air about everything. She brightened slightly, probably assuming I meant to help her recover from the Morrison debacle. But what I actually meant was that it was time to reveal the evidence I'd found in her desk drawer and finally confront her about the decade of sabotage and betrayal that had brought us to this moment. The confrontation I'd been planning finally arrived on a quiet Thursday morning, exactly 1 week after our return from the Morrison retreat. I'd spent those 7 days making copies of every piece of evidence, consulting with James Worthington about legal implications, and preparing for every possible response Celeste might attempt. Dad had called a family meeting ostensibly to discuss operational improvements and leadership development following the Morrison event. The three of us sat in his mahogany-paneled office, the same room where I'd received countless lectures about family loyalty and putting business first. Before we discuss future planning, I said, placing a thick manila folder on Dad's desk, I think we need to address some historical issues that have been affecting our family and our business. Celeste shifted uncomfortably in her leather chair. Zeph, if this is about the Morrison thing, again, I really don't think we need to. It's not about Morrison, I interrupted, my voice steady and calm. It's about the systematic sabotage, manipulation, and fraud that's been happening in this family for over 10 years. The silence that followed was profound. Dad's eyebrows rose in confusion, while Celeste's face went completely white. What are you talking about? She whispered. I opened the folder and began laying out documents methodically. Phone bills showing diverted calls, copies of intercepted mail, screenshots of fake text conversations, the Northwestern acceptance letter she'd declined on my behalf, bank records showing unauthorized access to my accounts, a complete timeline of destroyed relationships and stolen opportunities. I'm talking about the fact that you've been intercepting my mail, impersonating me in phone calls and text messages, spreading false information to my friends and romantic partners, and systematically destroying every significant opportunity in my life for the past decade. Dad picked up the Northwestern letter with shaking hands, reading the scholarship offer that could have changed my entire trajectory. "Celeste, what is this? I can explain," she stammered, but no explanation came. I continued methodically presenting each piece of evidence, while maintaining perfect professional composure. The high school boyfriend who thought I'd cheated on him with fake texts from my number. The college roommate who thought I was ignoring her because you intercepted her calls. The job interviews that went badly because you'd contacted my references with false information about my character. With each revelation, Dad's expression grew more horrified, and Celeste's denials became more desperate. "You don't understand the pressure I was under," she finally burst out, abandoning any pretense of innocence. "You were always Dad's favorite until I proved myself. You got all the attention, all the praise, all the opportunities. I had to level the playing field." "Level the playing field," Dad's voice was barely controlled fury. "You destroyed your sister's life to make yourself look better by comparison. I didn't destroy anything, I just redirected some opportunities that she would have wasted anyway. Look how successful she is now. This made her stronger." The complete absence of remorse in her voice was stunning. Even caught red-handed with irrefutable evidence, she was still trying to position herself as having done me a favor. James Worthington, who had arrived partway through the presentation at my request, cleared his throat. "Based on what I'm seeing here, we're looking at potential criminal charges. Mail fraud, identity theft, financial fraud, cyberstalking. The statute of limitations hasn't expired on most of these incidents." Celeste's confident facade finally cracked completely. "You wouldn't prosecute your own sister. Tell them, Daddy. We're family." But Dad was staring at her, as if seeing a stranger. "I don't know who you are," he said slowly. "The daughter I raised wouldn't be capable of this level of cruelty and deception." "I'm the same person I've always been," she protested. "I just did what I had to do to succeed in this family. You taught me that winning was everything, that family business came first. I was protecting our legacy. By destroying mine," I asked quietly. "By making me believe I was fundamentally flawed and unworthy of love or success." The conversation that followed was painful but necessary. Dad, to his credit, took full responsibility for creating the competitive dynamic that had fed Celeste's worst impulses. His favoritism hadn't been malicious, but it had been destructive, teaching her that love and approval were scarce resources, to be hoarded rather than shared. The legal resolution was swift. Faced with overwhelming evidence and the threat of criminal prosecution, Celeste agreed to resign from the company, immediately forfeit any ownership claims, and enter therapy to address her manipulation and narcissistic behaviors. She moved across the country within a month, claiming she needed space to find herself, but really running from the consequences of her actions. Dad restructured the company ownership, making me the majority shareholder and successor. But more importantly, he committed to rebuilding our relationship on a foundation of honesty, rather than the performance-based approval system that had damaged us both. The aftermath brought unexpected gifts. Sarah, my college roommate, reached out after I explained what had really happened during those years of apparent silence. Our friendship, stronger for having survived deception, became a cornerstone of my new support system. Marcus and I reconnected as well, building a genuine relationship based on who we'd become rather than who we'd been in high school. Most surprisingly, the Northwestern opportunity led to something even better. When I contacted them to explain the circumstances of my declined acceptance, they were so impressed by my professional accomplishments and the grace with which I'd handled family trauma that they offered me a customized executive education program. I completed it while running Hawthorne luxury events, earning credentials that opened doors to industry leadership roles I'd never imagined possible. The business itself thrived under my leadership. Without Celeste's interference and manipulation, our team's productivity soared. Clients specifically requested me for their most important events, and our reputation shifted from beautiful Instagram content to flawless execution and creative problem-solving. 6 months after the confrontation, Hawthorne Luxury Events was featured on the cover of Event Planning magazine as the future of family business excellence. The article focused on sustainable leadership, accountability, and the importance of merit-based succession planning. But the real victory wasn't professional success, it was personal peace. For the first time in my adult life, I stopped second-guessing myself, stopped waiting for relationships to implode, stopped believing I was fundamentally broken. The clarity that came from understanding the truth about my past freed me to build a future based on authentic connections and genuine accomplishment. Some people talk about blood family versus chosen family as if they're mutually exclusive. But I learned that sometimes choosing your family means setting boundaries with blood relatives who refuse to treat you with respect, while opening your heart to people who value your authentic self. Looking back, I'm almost grateful for Celeste's betrayal. Not because the pain was worth it, no one deserves that level of psychological manipulation. But because surviving it and exposing the truth taught me that I'm stronger, more capable, and more worthy of love than I ever believed possible. Have you ever discovered that someone you trusted completely had been working against you behind the scenes? How did you handle learning that your reality was different from what you'd believed? Drop a comment below, sharing your own experiences with family dynamics or workplace betrayals. Sometimes knowing we're not alone in these struggles makes all the difference. And if this story resonated with you, hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life drama and justice-served moments. I share these experiences hoping they'll help others recognize manipulation tactics and find the courage to stand up for themselves when family loyalty becomes toxic. Thanks for listening to my story, and remember, you deserve relationships built on honesty, not manipulation. Sometimes the most loving thing we can do is refuse to enable destructive behavior even when it comes from family. Until next time, choose your peace over their comfort, and never apologize for refusing to be someone's doormat.